Good evening, listeners. You're tuned into the ghostly broadcast, Paranormal Station. I'm your host, Timothy, broadcasting from my farm where the spirits carried in the night's mists fall onto my crops with the morning dew. Beyond the hustle and bustle of urban centers, many have flocked to the small towns and villages that refuse to yield to the modern era. Some date back millennia and carry the scars of eons past. On a long enough time scale, any place settled by people will have its time in the limelight of spirits, becoming a stage for malice, evil, and tragedy, forever remaining a theater for the souls to perform their ghastly plays. We travel to Europe tonight to hear testimonies of these places forgotten in time. Our first testimony. Dear Timothy, there's a trick to knowing which towns and cities across the UK were founded by the Romans. Essentially, any city that ends with Chester was once established as a Roman settlement. It's why the whole country is littered with them, and they seem to stop right before you get to Scotland. I've been a soldier for a few years now. I passed P Company, and I've been based down Colchester as my first posting. Recently, I've been given my first regimental duty. It's not as impressive as it sounds. For me, it amounts to day and night shifts guarding the front gate of the barracks. It's a crap job, but everyone at some point in their careers has to do it. It was just my turn. I didn't particularly mind, but the nights dragged on. It didn't matter how much coffee or energy drinks I threw down my neck, my head was nodding like a dashboard dog by the end. One night, as I'm standing at the gate with my buddy, we're making idle chit-chat and trying our best to stay awake and stave off the boredom. A strange noise starts ringing through the night, the gentle beat of a large body of men marching in lockstep. My mate and I looked at each other, confirming that we were both hearing it. Over the next few minutes, the noise became louder and louder. Voices were barking unintelligible orders carried on the cold night air. As the marching troops approached, we saw them crest over a hill. An army bigger than I'd ever seen advanced towards us like a giant snake in the distance. Legions of men in plate armor that glistened in the moonlight flowed down the valley. At the head of this vast army were men on horses with ornate helmets. A standard bearer carried a giant golden eagle atop a large staff at the front of the column. My sentry partner and I gawked in disbelief at the sight. The closer they got, the pounding of marching boots shook the ground beneath us. We could see the faces of the men as they approached. Old, young, scarred, and baby-faced, each soldier was unique, but still one and the same, with his comrades marching shoulder to shoulder. Then we started to notice them drop. One by one they seemed to wither and die. Injuries appeared, and blood poured. Weapons and shields were dropped, and armor became tattered. They fell where they stood, but the army kept marching. The ones still standing trod right over their fallen. By the time they'd reached the barracks gates, only a few were left. Still, they limped on, maintaining their discipline and advancing. Eventually, the only one left was the standard bearer. Using that tremendous golden eagle as a walking stick, he painfully hauled himself along the ground. Eventually, he got right up to us. He didn't even notice us as his armor fell from his shoulders. Blood poured from him, and wrinkles formed on his tired face as he appeared to age in an instant. A few steps from the front gate, the tired old man clutching onto this grand golden staff collapsed at our feet. I stepped over to him and looked into his eyes. At first, he stared at the starlit sky, then he turned to me. In a brief second, We locked eyes, soldier to soldier, and then, like dust carried on the wind, he vanished into the ether. My sentry partner and I didn't tell anyone what we'd seen. No one would have believed us anyway. After that, my duty came to an end, and I carried on with my career. I wonder if anyone else has seen the mysterious Roman legion while manning the barrack gates. Maybe they have, and it's just not talked about. Kind regards, Jacob. Thank you for your testimony, Jacob. Throughout the millennia, soldiers have always been a constant in history. Steadfast in their duty and dedication, no matter the causes they serve. Our next testimony comes from the Ryan on the north coast of England. Dear Timothy, I grew up in a small town on the northeast coast of England. The place was known for being a resort town during the 19th century. It's picturesque and out of the way, so in a sense, it still is. Suppose you start at the beach and walk up the valley through the gardens. Go deep into the woods, sticking to the south bank of the river. Keep to the path, and after a weaving climb, you'll start to see trees that don't belong. A redwood here and a monkey puzzle there, trees from all over the world. Then, like crossing the threshold of a fairy tale, you'll emerge at the foot of an imposing Victorian manor. Rushpool Hall was built by the Bell family, whose patriarch was a titan of northeastern industry. But, as with all dynasties, they wither and die. A mysterious suicide, a ravaging fire, and a sudden fatal illness took the gorgeous home of Gothic revival from the Bells, and time did the rest. Today, it stands as a hotel and wedding venue. My cousin recently got married there, and it was a pleasure to stay there with my wife and son. It's not the first time I've stayed there, though, but it was undoubtedly a better night's sleep. I was 11 years old the first time I spent the night at Rushpool Hall. A massive leak in our house had made it uninhabitable while the work was being done, so my mother, my twin, and I had to stay there for 6 weeks. I knew all about the place. The history, the grounds, the woods in the valley, and, of course, the deaths. They were what kept me up at night when I was trying to sleep, tucked up away on the top floor of the enormous mansion. One night, while lying quietly in bed, listening to the knocks and groans of pipes and boards, I was fighting the urge to fall asleep. I didn't dare because I knew in my bones that ghosts were in the walls. My eyes darted around the room as I cowered behind the sheets. I heard the rattling of a chain and tires rolling in gravel. I listened to a conversation and giddy laughter coming from in front of me. I saw a shadow dart across the room, and then a light emerged in the middle of the room. The light warped and changed into a moving black and white image, as if an old projector was screening a silent movie onto the air. I saw a man in a top hat riding a bicycle, smiling and laughing as he did. Then he turned to the camera and looked right at me. I yelped and threw the sheets over my head. I stayed there for the rest of the night. When I woke up, it was morning, and the room was empty. Nothing was amiss. I spent the rest of the day questioning my own sanity as well as being stupidly tired. I'd heard about people's minds playing tricks on them. I thought that maybe because I was so sure the place was haunted and so damn tired from not sleeping, I'd willed something into existence. A hallucination to let me see what I believed was there. For 19 years, that's what I told myself. It was all in my head. Then, I attended my cousin's wedding. I showed my wife around the place after the reception dinner. I even showed her the old room I'd been in all those years ago. I even showed her the part where the history of the place is. "Is this them?" she asked, pointing at the family portraits of the Bells. In an innocuous corner of the display, barely noticeable in the back, was a picture of a man on a bicycle with a big laughing grin. The same man looking straight at the camera. The same man looking straight at me. "Yours, Ryan." "Thank you for your testimony, Ryan." The spirits that laid claim to places in life often retain their claims in death. They are tied to the things they cannot take into the world beyond. Our next testimony comes from Marcel in northern France. Dear Timothy, my name is Marcel, and I hail from a very famous little village. One that many of your listeners may have heard of, for Azincourt was the battle site of a great English victory and a crippling defeat for France in the 15th century. Scholars across the ages have long studied the battle, how it played out, and the enormous ramifications of its aftermath. But no one agrees on precisely where that battle actually took place. All anyone can say with certainty is that it happened right here, next to my hometown. The battles fought over these lands on the continent have been romanticized by avid history students for time immemorial. But, as I will attest to, the reality is far from removed from chivalric knights seeking glory in battle. On a cold October morning, I was taking a walk in the fields around the village. A cold mist had settled over the woods, and even the morning bird songs were silenced by the deathly quiet, only interrupted by the squelch of my boots in the soft, wet mud. I walked through the woodland and out into a large clearing between the wood blocks, and then I saw them. Clamoring in murmurs were thousands of men, clad in mail and armor, standing shoulder to shoulder and facing each other down across the plains. To my right stood the heavy men-at-arms of the English, flanked by their famous longbowmen. To my left was the vastly larger force of the French, heavily armored with many mounted on horses. I must have stumbled onto a very dedicated reenactment, or maybe even a film set. Still, there were no camera crews in sight or anyone in modern clothing. It looked as real as I could have imagined it. Standing unnoticed at the side of the woods, I watched as the opening moves of the battle were played. As the historians had written, the French cavalry moved to attack the English longbows, but large stakes driven into the ground drove them back. Then, as the French vanguard approached the center, I witnessed the true horror and hell of the battle from a point-blank view. Men clad in heavy plate armor marched into the English center. Arrows rained at them from meters away, piercing the weak points and sending the knights to their knees, only to be squashed into the deep mud by their comrades in the tightly packed formation. They slipped and slid in the mud. The unluckiest ones fell. Without being able to get back up, they drowned as they thrashed helplessly. As all the carnage unfolded, they had not even made it to the English vanguard. When they did, the longbowmen broke rank from the tree line and jumped into the fray. Without heavy armor to encumber them, they hacked and slashed at the helpless French knights. I watched the brutal melee of bloody barbarism as men hacked, slashed, and stabbed at each other. Some, with barely any room to swing their swords, dropped their weapons in favor of fists, punching, clawing, and biting at one another in senseless violence. Mud, blood, excrement, and entrails were churned up together in the mass of bodies. And yet more Frenchmen piled in from the rear, squeezing the life out of those stuck in the middle. Men wrung their hands at the air as they tried to catch one last breath, suffocating as bodies packed in tighter and tighter. The horror unfolding before me became even grimmer when I started to look closely at the bodies of the fallen. They weren't dead. None of them were. In a sick twist of fate, even those with injuries incompatible with life were still writhing and moaning. as if death itself refused to come and claim them. Men beat down hammers and axes onto the chests and heads of their enemies, but not a single one died. They moaned and screamed in agony. No one was granted any peace. As the battle went on, the pile of moaning men became higher and still. The fighting continued. They clambered onto the hills of the dead, fighting each other in an eternal, never-ending conflict. I don't know how long I had been watching, but as the battle showed no signs of stopping, I had to turn and walk away. When I left the woods and made for the village, I turned to see if I could catch one more glimpse of the forgotten battle. There, sitting on horseback, were the leaders of the French army, unperturbed by the carnage. Behind them, more and more men on foot marched down into the mouth of the battle. I didn't witness the battle again after that. It must have been a once-in-a-lifetime experience, just for me. Entire noble houses were wiped out in that battle as the French commanders marched their men into a meat grinder. Seeing them sitting on their horses, ordering more and more men to their dooms, is the image that stays with me. These battles are not romantic or glorious. They are ugly and cruel. I know that now. I saw it with my own eyes. Yours sincerely, Marcel. Thank you for your testimony, Marcel. It is difficult not to feel removed from history. It is abstract and alien because we have never witnessed or felt it firsthand. You were lucky, Marcel, to be shown by the spirits of those who lived it. Our last testimony is from Leopold in Germany. Dear Timothy, I come from a small town in Germany where the talk is small and rumors abound. Many of these rumors surround the old church and the retired reclusive priest who used to lead the congregation. Nowadays, no one goes to this church, but back before my time, it was supposedly thriving. The old story goes that there were some kids in the congregation who went missing, and the priest and his friends had something to do with it. What was even creepier is that they supposedly took trophies from their victims. There's a middle-aged woman who is often seen around town. She doesn't talk much, and everyone's parents told us to stay away from her. The odd thing about her is the missing ring finger on her left hand. Naturally, kids being kids, we used to theorize endlessly about how she had been the last victim to escape. Some people said that she'd been offered as a bride to the devil, and that's how she lost the finger. All the kind of crap that kids come up with to frighten each other. One day we were messing around at the church, and we started to dare each other to go inside. Eventually, after enough jokes and harmless ribbing, we all decided to go in. There was nothing untoward in there. It was abandoned, littered with beer cans and reeking of stale urine. It was a mess, but it wasn't what we were looking for. We wanted to see more and get a real good fright. Heading further into the derelict stone building, we looked under the old altar. Under its faded, moldy cover was a trapdoor leading to an unknown basement. That was when the fun really started for us. I remember actually feeling excited. We'd be the talk of the school if we could find something interesting in there that we could show off. We could solve the mystery of the old church. As we opened the door, a foul, rotten smell wafted up the ladder and made me feel sick. The mood turned sour, but we'd come too far to back down. One by one, we slowly descended the ladder into the dark unknown. Shining a light, I gazed around the hole in the floor. Every wall in the small square room had chains hooked on spikes beaten into the rock. Carvings of pentagrams, letters, and symbols I didn't recognize were strewn about the place. Walls, floor, and ceiling. And there was blood, dried and stale, but so much blood. In the center of the floor, in the middle of the most enormous, most detailed pentagram, was a Bible. It had been torn to shreds, and on top of its ripped pages was a necklace adorned with ears, skin, and fingers, little fingers. As soon as we realized we were in over our heads, we went straight to the police. After that, it was all out of our hands, but the town became buzzing with fresh gossip. The cold cases had been reopened, and it wasn't long before all eyes were on the old retired hermit who had once led his flock in that old church. One night, at the peak of the insane rumors, a fire erupted at the church. As the firemen and police surrounded the blaze, trying desperately to put it out, I was among the crowd of gawkers who had come to watch. The old church crumbled and fell as the fire ravaged it. I could feel the intense heat from the police cordon. When the walls tumbled down, I looked in and I saw a body. Burnt, charred, and kneeling in prayer at the altar, clutching something at its breast. The flames licked and spat. The wood crackled and groaned. Then a large, black, burning arm rose from the floor. I didn't know if anyone else saw it, but I certainly did. By sunrise, the fire had subsided. As the services and volunteers picked through the charred remains of the building, someone shouted up. In the middle of the church, they found two things that hadn't been touched by the flames. Right before where the altar once stood was the white collar of a priest and the desiccated finger of a little girl. Yours, Leopold. Thank you, Leopold, for your testimony. It is unwise to trifle with forces that you don't understand. To play games with them and offer them others as a sacrifice is a crime most foul. This concludes tonight's broadcast. You've been listening to Ghostly Broadcast, Paranormal Station. I've been your host, Timothy. If you've enjoyed these testimonies and would like to be alerted of our latest broadcasts, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. You will be supporting our work in bringing the experiences of those who have brushed up against the paranormal to listeners all around the world. Good night, listeners, and be safe.